Well, hello, class. I just wanted to bring you through some of the learning objectives of Chapter 2. And Chapter 2 is quite an interesting chapter, and that's to say the least. Because in this chapter, we are essentially going to be talking about trade offs, comparative advantage, and the market system. There are some interesting learning objectives that I want you to pay attention to, especially in this chapter. The first of those learning objectives is the production possibilities frontier and the meaning of opportunity costs. We're looking at analyzing opportunity costs and trading things off. Now, if you look at your book on page 42 to 47, it goes into the PPF, as we say in economics. Um, the thing is that we essentially trade things off because we make what they call an opportunity cost decision. That means what are the closest things that we are giving up in order to do something else? It's not really rocket science. What it essentially means is, okay, you're in class tonight. Well, why are you in class? You're in class right now because you figure what you're giving up is not as valuable as what you're doing now. In other words, watching television, helping kids with homework, fixing your car, on and on it goes. But the idea is, what are you giving up to do what you're doing? That's an opportunity cost decision. On comparative advantage and trade, that's on page 48 to 54 of your book. That basically is going to be describing how comparative advantage serves on the basis of trade. Basically, comparative advantage is the ability of an individual, firm, or country to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost, okay, what we're giving up, than other producers. And the third objective of this chapter is to kind of look at the market system. And in your book, it'll be pages 54 to 62. How does a market system work? Well, what do markets do? Markets enable buyers and sellers of goods and services to come together in order to barter or to do trade. So, some of the key terms that you want to use in this chapter are going to be absolute advantage, which is going to be the ability of an individual, firm, or a country to produce more of a good or service than their competitors do. But they all have the equal amount of resources to use. So, who's giving up what to use what resources? So, for example, if a country has absolute advantage, okay, say like Venezuela, they produce oil. Well, they might produce more oil than anyone else on the planet, but that's not necessarily the case, but say that was. Well, they would have an absolute advantage over their competitors in order to trade with other countries at the lowest possible cost to compete for importing oil. They'll be the exporters, but the importers would be able to get the best advantage of a lower cost. But they would have advantage in Venezuela over their competitors because they would have complete control and be able to send out the most amount of export oil to a country. The other thing is, on page 55 of your book, I believe, when they're talking about the circular flow diagram. It's a model that illustrates how different participants in markets are going to be linked together. Now, we've just talked about absolute advantage. Now, if you go to your book on page 51, they're going to be talking about comparative advantage. That means you not just export one thing, but you also export something else, but more of something else where another country needs it, okay, and you can produce it still at a lower cost than that country can't produce it at. So comparative advantage is the ability of an individual, firm, or a country to produce produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than its competitors. The book also talks about economic growth on page 47 of your book. It's the ability of the economy to increase the production of goods and services. That's kind of like a no-brainer. And I think you can figure out what an entrepreneur is. The other thing is opportunity cost, and I know I just mentioned that. But technically, what is opportunity cost? It's the highest valued alternative that must be given up to engage in a particular activity. And the other thing is, we talked about the PPF curve, or the production possibilities curve. The PPF, and if you look on page 42 of your book, it should give you a good illustration. It's a curve that's showing the maximum attainable combination of two products that can be produced with available resources and current technology. In other words, in any economy, you can only produce so much of one thing and so much of another with limited resources. Always keep that in mind. Limited resources. What does that mean? Okay? So the idea is, say you're producing, they always use the same thing, like guns and butter, or cars and butter, or computers, or something. But the thing is that, obviously, an automobile is worth a heck of a lot more than a gun. Okay? Maybe. In some instances, maybe not. But the thing is, how much would it cost to produce so many cars versus so many guns? Well, obviously, if you're producing more cars, you produce less guns. You can produce more guns, you produce less cars. But the point is that with available resources, you can only produce so much of each one. The thing I really want you to pay attention to is scarcity. Economics is all about scarcity. If you look on page 42 of your book, it gives the definition of scarcity. It's a situation in which unlimited wants exceed the limited resources available to fulfill those wants. And all that means is that economists look at every resource in the world as scarce. How do I mean that? Well, if you go to the sink in your house and you turn on the water, you see plenty of it. You're not thinking that that water is scarce. You can't even fathom how it would be scarce in another part of the world, but it is. There are many countries that can't even drink their water because it's so polluted, it's so disgusting, or it's filled with bacteria, or filled with lead, ocean water, or river water that's dumped into tributaries that go into wells where people have to purify their water in order to drink. Well, their water is very scarce. In fact, in some European countries, they drink wine instead of water, but that's something else. That's because the water is so bad. But anyway, okay, what I want you to do for this first week, and I will be explaining this to you, I won't be in class, but Dr. Fabrizio will be covering me for that first class. He will be going over chapter 1, and what I want you to do is chapter 2. I am putting this link for you, and obviously when you click the link, you'll be able to go over the highlights of chapter 2, which I will be reviewing in class with you when I see you for the first time in November, the beginning of November, on week 2. In fact, I will be seeing you November 3rd, I believe. So we will review chapter 2, go over the highlights of it, but I want you to look it over online while I'm away. Okay? It's not going to take you very long, and then we'll discuss it. So that's what you're doing, and that's what I just talked to you about. So I will see you guys on November the 3rd. Looking forward to it. Bye.